The last breath. It was the end, or at least, that's what he thought. Captain Jack Williams had fought hard, leading his crew through endless battles across the stars. But now, everything was falling apart. The ship's engines had failed, and the lights flickered, struggling to stay on. The screams of the crew echoed in his mind as the ship plunged toward the black void of space, his body tightly strapped into his seat. Jack had done everything he could to save them, but it was too late. The controls were dead, and the hull of the ship was slowly crumbling under the pressure of the cold vacuum. His crew was lost. He was lost. There was nothing left to do but wait for the inevitable. With every passing second, his thoughts grew slower, his body more exhausted. The pain in his chest was unbearable, a deep ache that spread through him, making it hard to breathe. His vision blurred as the blackness crept in, taking away his strength. His mind was shutting down, and his body was following. But even in those final moments, Jack's mind refused to let go of one thing: survival. He had fought too long, too hard to give up now. He fought against the darkness that threatened to claim him, but it was no use. With one final breath, his eyes closed, and the last thought in his head was of his crew, of Earth, and of the fight they had lost. And then, silence. It felt like an eternity. Jack wasn't sure if he was still alive, or if he had crossed into the next world. He couldn't hear anything, and he couldn't see. His body felt cold, weightless. He didn't know how much time had passed, but it felt like he had been floating in that nothingness forever. But then, slowly, the silence broke. A faint hum filled the air, soft at first, but growing louder with each passing second. His senses began to return, one by one. He could feel the warmth of something gentle against his skin, something soft. Was he dreaming? Was this the afterlife? He tried to move, but his body wouldn't obey him. Every part of him felt heavy, like it had been drained of all energy. But his eyes slowly opened, and he saw a blur. Shapes, colors, and light filtered through his vision, and with each passing second, they grew clearer. He blinked, trying to adjust, but all he could make out was the shape of someone sitting beside him. He felt a rush of warmth against his face, like a soft touch on his cheek. He struggled to focus his eyes, but the first thing he saw were eyes. Not human eyes, not like his, but eyes that glowed, filled with sorrow. They were wide, beautiful, and impossible to look away from. "You're awake," a voice whispered, so soft it was almost like a breath. It was a voice unlike anything Jack had ever heard. It wasn't harsh, it wasn't cold, but it was filled with something he couldn't place. He tried to speak, but no words came. His throat was dry, his voice was gone. Panic started to set in. What was going on? Where was he? Who was this person? The figure leaned closer, and Jack saw her clearly now. A woman. No, not a woman, she wasn't human. Her skin shimmered like stardust, glowing softly in the dim light. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, moving on its own, as if it were part of the wind. But it wasn't the beauty of her appearance that left him stunned, it was the sadness in her eyes, the look of someone who had been waiting for him. She was crying. Jack's heart raced. He had seen many things in his life, many battles, many enemies, but nothing like this. The tears fell from her eyes, glowing in the dim light. They landed on his face, cool and gentle, but full of sorrow. Her voice broke the silence again, but this time, it was filled with something more urgent. "You should not be here, human," she said, her voice barely a whisper. This place is not for you." Jack's mind raced with questions, but his body was too weak to ask. What was happening? Where was he? And who was this person? An alien? A creature from another world? His thoughts were scattered, but one thing was clear, he wasn't dead. Not yet. The woman's eyes softened, and she leaned closer to him. "You are not alone," she said, her words laced with both grief and hope. "You have been chosen. Before Jack could process her words, everything went dark again. The princess's tears. Jack awoke again, but this time, it wasn't like before. His surroundings were different, more vibrant. The soft hum of the air was replaced by the gentle whisper of something far away, as if the very walls around him were alive, breathing with the pulse of a distant world. He could feel the warmth of something wrapped around him, something comforting, but also unfamiliar. As his senses began to return, he realized he was no longer lying in the cold, metal confines of his ship. He wasn't even on Earth anymore. Where was he? The soft bed beneath him was unlike anything he had ever felt, its material smooth and cool to the touch, as if it had been made from the fabric of the stars themselves. His body felt better, but it was still sluggish, like it was struggling to catch up with his mind. He tried to move, but his muscles were stiff, reluctant to cooperate. Slowly, he lifted his hand, running his fingers over the fabric beneath him. It felt strange, otherworldly, almost alive. The soft hum that filled the air grew louder, and then, from the corner of his vision, he saw her again. The alien princess. She was standing by a window, her silhouette framed by a soft, ethereal glow that radiated from beyond. Her long silver hair flowed around her like the very fabric of space itself, shimmering and shifting in patterns Jack couldn't quite comprehend. But it was her eyes that held him, pulling him in. They were still filled with sorrow, but something else lingered there, too, something Jack couldn't name. Fear, perhaps. Hope. She had been crying when he had first seen her, but now, she was still. The tears were gone, yet the sadness in her gaze was unmistakable. She seemed lost in thought, like she was waiting for something, or someone. Jack's heart raced as his mind tried to grasp the situation. He was still alive, but how? Where was he? And why was she here with him? Her presence was so otherworldly, so far beyond anything he had ever experienced. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. It was as if she had been expecting him to wake, anticipating this very moment. Slowly, she walked toward him, her steps quiet but graceful, almost as if she was floating rather than walking. "You're awake," she said, her voice soft and melodic, like the wind through distant trees. But Jack could hear the weight of her words. There was something heavy in her tone, something she wasn't saying. Jack tried to speak, but his throat was still dry, his voice a mere whisper. "Where am I?" His voice barely made it past his lips, hoarse and weak. Her gaze softened, but the sadness never left her eyes. "You are on my planet," she replied, her words carrying a weight that seemed to settle in the pit of Jack's stomach. A place that was never meant for humans. Her words made his mind race. "What do you mean? Why am I here?" The princess paused, as if searching for the right words. She sat beside him, her presence commanding yet gentle. "You were brought here for a reason," she said, her voice barely audible. "But it is not a reason you will understand yet." Jack felt the confusion growing inside him, but there was something in her eyes that made him hesitate to press further. She was holding something back, something important. He could feel it, even though she wasn't saying it outright. The princess leaned closer, her gaze locking with his. "I didn't want this," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. "I didn't want to bring you here, but I had no choice." Before Jack could ask her what she meant, there was a sudden shift in the air around them, like the world itself was holding its breath. A low, resonating hum filled the room, and the princess stood up, her eyes darting to the window as if something had caught her attention. Jack followed her gaze, but he saw nothing. Yet, he could feel it, a presence, an energy that was growing stronger, closer. It wasn't the princess's, and it wasn't anything he had ever experienced. This was something far more dangerous. The princess's face hardened, her earlier sadness replaced with a quiet, fierce determination. "They are coming," she said, her voice steady now, but there was an edge to it. "And they will not stop until they have you." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Who? What do you mean?" But the princess didn't answer. Instead, she moved quickly, her movements fluid and practiced as she approached a table filled with strange devices. She began to work, pressing buttons, pulling levers, and turning dials, all with an air of urgency. "They won't find you if you stay close," she said without looking back at him. "But you must be ready. They will be here soon." Confusion mixed with fear inside Jack. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "Why are you helping me?" She finally turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "Because you are the only one who can stop them," she said simply. The room seemed to grow colder as her words sank in. Jack wasn't sure who they were or why he was important, but the urgency in her voice made it clear, time was running out. And somehow, the fate of both their worlds rested on his shoulders. A dangerous alliance. The princess's words echoed in Jack's mind as he watched her move across the room, her graceful movements betraying the storm of thoughts behind her calm exterior. "You are the only one who can stop them." The weight of those words felt heavier than anything he had ever carried in his life. What could he, a mere human, possibly do to stop the unknown forces that seemed to be closing in? He was still struggling to make sense of everything, and yet the sense of urgency in the princess's actions made it clear that time was not on their side. Jack pushed himself up from the bed, his body protesting as his muscles screamed in pain, but he ignored it. The princess didn't seem to notice his discomfort as she continued to manipulate the strange devices on the table, her focus absolute. "What's happening?" Jack asked, his voice shaking slightly from the effort to stand. "Who's coming for me? And why me?" The princess turned, her glowing eyes meeting his once more. Her expression softened, just for a moment, as if she was debating whether to tell him more. But then, as if something in the air shifted, her face hardened again, and she stepped closer. "You're not just anyone, Jack Williams," she said, her voice low and filled with a quiet urgency. "You're the key to stopping a war that's been brewing for centuries, a war that has nothing to do with humans or our galaxy." She paused, her gaze flickering away for a brief moment, like she was remembering something painful. "But you've been chosen for a reason. You've been brought here to stop the darkness that threatens everything." Jack's mind was racing. He had no idea what she was talking about. A war that had nothing to do with humans. What did that even mean? He took a step forward, ignoring the dizziness that swept over him. "I'm just a soldier. I don't have any special powers. Why do you think I can stop this?" The princess's lips parted, and for a moment, Jack thought she was about to explain everything, to give him the answers he desperately needed. But instead, she closed her eyes, almost as if bracing herself for what was coming. "It's not about power," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about understanding. About knowing when to fight, and when to let go. You may not have the strength of a warrior, Jack, but you have something far more important, your heart." Jack felt his chest tighten at her words. It was as if she saw something in him that he didn't even know was there. But before he could ask her to elaborate, a loud, ominous hum filled the air. The room seemed to vibrate, as if the very walls were trembling. Jack's heart raced, and he instinctively moved toward the window, looking out to the horizon. The princess followed him, her presence close but silent. Outside, the once peaceful sky had darkened, and strange, shifting shadows danced across the surface of the land, growing larger with every passing second. Jack could feel the pressure building in his chest, a weight that told him whatever was coming was not good. "Get ready," the princess said, her voice hard now, more commanding. "They're here." Jack's pulse quickened. Who were they? The enemy? Or something worse? His mind was filled with questions, but the princess didn't have the time to answer. She moved quickly, pulling out a long, metallic rod from beneath the table and pressing a hidden button. The rod extended, transforming into a sleek weapon with a glowing core. "What is that?" Jack asked, his eyes wide with surprise. "Something I'll need to fight them," she replied, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room. And something you'll need, too. Before Jack could react, the walls around them began to shift, twisting and warping, as though the space itself was bending. A deep rumble echoed from the ground, and Jack's ears began to ring. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing: whatever came next, he needed to be ready. The princess looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You're not alone, Jack," she said. "We'll face this together, but you must trust me. You must trust that the choice you make now will determine everything." A sudden blast of energy slammed into the side of the building, and Jack barely managed to keep his balance as the room rocked. He looked back at the princess, who was already in motion, moving toward the door with swift, purposeful steps. "Stay close," she commanded. "And whatever happens, don't let go." Jack felt his heart racing, adrenaline surging through his veins. The princess had given him no answers, only cryptic words and warnings. But now wasn't the time for questions. There was a battle ahead, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he had a reason to fight. Unseen forces. The world outside had changed in an instant. The once serene landscape of the alien world now felt like a battlefield. A strange energy filled the air, thick and suffocating, as if the very atmosphere was alive with hostility. The princess moved with purpose, her glowing presence cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. Jack, on the other hand, was still trying to catch his breath, trying to make sense of everything. But there was no time for hesitation. "Stay close," the princess said again, her voice firm. She turned to him, her silver hair flowing behind her like a veil of light. "Whatever happens, do not stray from my side." Jack nodded, though his mind was still clouded with questions. There was something in the air now, something darker than the fear that had gripped him earlier. The weight of it pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. But the princess was already moving toward a door that had materialized in the far wall, hidden in the shifting walls of the room. She didn't look back, didn't wait for him to catch up. Jack followed her, his heart hammering in his chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, but he didn't have the luxury of slowing down. He had no idea what was coming, but he could feel it. He could feel the darkness closing in on them. The energy was growing stronger, and he knew, deep down, that the princess's warning was more than just a precaution. Something was coming. Something that had been waiting for them, for him. As they moved through the corridors, Jack noticed the strange hum that filled the air, not just outside, but all around them. It wasn't just the ship's systems or the natural energy of the planet. No, this hum was different. It felt alive, like it was pulsing with intent. It was the same energy he had felt earlier, when the world seemed to twist and warp around him. And now, it was everywhere. Jack tried to shake off the unease settling in his stomach. He had faced enemies before, human, alien, whatever, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was something else, something far beyond his understanding. And the princess, for all her strength and grace, seemed to be just as affected by it as he was. "Who are they?" Jack asked, his voice low, his breath shallow. He couldn't stand the silence anymore, the fear gnawing at him. "Who's coming after us?" The princess didn't answer immediately, but when she did, her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper, fear, maybe, or regret. "They are the unseen," she said. "Ancient forces, older than even my people. They have existed since the dawn of time, hidden in the fabric of the universe, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves." Jack's mind raced. Unseen? What do you mean, hidden? How are we supposed to fight something like that? The princess's pace slowed just enough for Jack to catch up. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You can't fight them directly," she replied. "Not with weapons. Not with strength. They don't fight like we do. They don't need to." She paused, her eyes growing distant as if seeing something beyond him, beyond this moment. "They control the fabric of reality itself. They manipulate time, space, and energy. You can only outsmart them. Jack's head spun. Manipulate reality? Outsmart them? How was that even possible? He was just a soldier, he had no experience with things like this. And yet, he couldn't help but feel that there was something she wasn't telling him. Something important. We can't run from them, she continued, her voice softer now. But we can hide. We can fight in the shadows, where they can't reach us. She stopped in front of a large, metallic door, its surface smooth and dark, like a piece of obsidian. I'm going to teach you how to survive, Jack. How to survive against them. But it won't be easy. You'll have to learn to think differently. They will test you, they will push you to your limits, but if you're strong enough, if you can control your fear, then you might just have a chance. Jack swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. He had no choice but to trust her. He had no choice but to follow her. The door in front of them opened with a hiss, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an eerie, pulsing light. The walls were lined with strange symbols, glowing faintly, and the air was thick with the same energy that had been suffocating him since he woke up. What is this place? Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The princess stepped into the room, her gaze scanning the space. This is the heart of the Nexus, she said, her tone reverent. It's where we store our knowledge, our power. It's where we learn to protect ourselves from the unseen. As they entered the chamber, the energy seemed to shift, becoming more intense, more alive. Jack could feel it coursing through his veins, like it was calling to him. The room itself seemed to pulse, as if it had a heartbeat, and for a moment, Jack wondered if it was alive. But before he could ask, the princess was already at a central platform in the middle of the room, her hands hovering over a series of glowing orbs. This is where you'll begin, she said, her voice steady, though her eyes were filled with determination. Here, you'll learn how to harness the power they use, how to think like them, how to fight them without ever laying a hand on them. It's the only way. Jack stepped forward, the weight of the task ahead settling heavily on his shoulders. Whatever he had thought this mission was about, it was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding the impossible, about facing forces that could unravel the very fabric of reality. And somehow, he had to find a way to stop them. The betrayal. The room hummed with energy, the walls shifting and pulsing as if reacting to their presence. Jack stood at the heart of the Nexus, his mind swirling with confusion, fear, and a growing sense of responsibility. The princess was teaching him, guiding him through ancient knowledge that seemed impossible to grasp, yet something felt off. The energy in the room, while powerful, also felt dangerous. Like it was alive, waiting for the right moment to turn against him. As the days passed, though Jack wasn't sure how much time had actually passed, he grew more adept at understanding the strange forces they were manipulating. He learned to sense the flow of energy around him, to focus his thoughts and bend the fabric of reality just enough to alter small things. At first, it was only subtle changes, shifting objects across the room or manipulating light to see better in the dark. But as the princess guided him, Jack began to feel a strange connection to the Nexus, a bond he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the Nexus that had changed. Jack had changed. He had grown stronger, more attuned to the energy that surrounded them, but with it came a growing unease. The more he learned, the more he realized that the princess wasn't telling him everything. She was holding something back, something important. One evening, as Jack sat in the corner of the chamber, practicing manipulating energy into intricate shapes, he caught sight of the princess standing by one of the glowing orbs, her expression distant. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, and Jack, despite his own concerns, couldn't help but approach her. Is something wrong? Jack asked, his voice soft, careful. The princess didn't turn to face him at first. Instead, she continued to stare at the orb, her hands gently tracing its surface. I've been hiding things from you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack felt his stomach drop. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. What do you mean? He asked, his voice thick with a mix of fear and curiosity. He had known something was off, but hearing it from her lips made it feel real, like the foundation of everything he had come to trust was crumbling. The princess took a deep breath, as though preparing herself. Slowly, she turned to him, her silver hair flowing like a halo around her. Her eyes, once filled with sadness, now held something else, guilt, perhaps, or regret. "I've been hiding the truth," she said. "The unseen aren't just enemies of my people, they are part of us. They are the very thing that gave my people power. And that power," she paused, her voice faltering. "That power was never meant to be used. It was a mistake. But now, it's too late." Jack's heart raced. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You're saying we've been training to fight, ourselves." The princess closed her eyes, her expression tightening. "I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to be part of this, Jack. But you were brought here for a reason. You were chosen to stop the unseen, yes, but also to stop my people. To stop me." Jack stumbled back, the weight of her words crashing down on him. "What are you talking about? You brought me here. You said you needed me." "I did," she replied, her voice heavy with remorse. "But I lied to you. I thought that by teaching you, by preparing you, you would save us. But now I see the truth. We can't escape what we are. My people were the ones who created the unseen. And now, I am the last one standing between you and them." Jack's world spun. The reality of what she was saying hit him like a blow to the chest. The princess, the one who had shown him kindness, who had given him purpose, was the very thing he had been preparing to fight. She wasn't a savior. She was the key to unleashing the darkness. "Why?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse, the confusion clear in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me? Why hide all of this from me?" The princess's gaze dropped to the ground, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her confession. "Because I didn't want to be the villain in this story. I didn't want you to see me as the enemy." She looked back up at him, her eyes filled with a kind of resigned sorrow. "But I am. I always was." A cold chill swept through the room, and Jack's mind raced. This wasn't what he had signed up for. This wasn't the mission he had come here to complete. He was supposed to fight aliens, not fight alongside them. And now, the woman he had trusted was the very enemy he had been trained to defeat. Jack's hand tightened into a fist, his pulse quickening. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice low, filled with a quiet fury. The princess's face hardened, and she stepped away from him, her expression shifting back to the cold, calculating demeanor Jack had seen only in brief moments. "Now, you must choose. You can leave, and I will make sure you're safe. I can open a portal and send you back to Earth. You'll never have to know what happens here." Jack shook his head, the idea of running from this situation unthinkable. "And what if I stay?" he asked, his voice rising. "What if I choose to fight? What happens then?" The princess's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll have to fight me," she said, her voice firm. "Because I won't let you stop what's coming." The silence between them stretched long, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The princess had betrayed him. She had lied to him, manipulated him, and used him as a pawn in her own twisted game. But he had a choice to make. He could walk away, he could run back to Earth and forget all of this ever happened. Or he could stay and face her, face the truth, and stop the darkness before it consumed everything. He took a deep breath, his decision clear. "I'll fight," Jack said, his voice steady, unwavering. "I'll fight you. And I'll stop this." The princess's eyes darkened, and for the first time since he had met her, Jack saw true fear in her gaze. "Then prepare yourself, Jack Williams," she said coldly. "Because this is only the beginning. The escape. The chamber was thick with tension, the air pulsating with an energy neither Jack nor the princess could fully control. Every moment felt like it was pushing them closer to the inevitable. Jack's mind raced, but his body felt heavy with indecision. The betrayal hung between them, suffocating the space. And yet, despite everything, he had made his choice. He would stay and fight. The princess was already moving, as if expecting this decision. She didn't turn to face him, but he could feel her energy shift, her stance becoming more rigid, more defensive. The room around them seemed to hum louder, as if it were warning them both. Jack's heart raced as he stepped forward, his hand instinctively reaching for the energy rod that had been left on the table earlier. "I'm not going anywhere," Jack said, his voice clear. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The fate of this world, and Earth, was in his hands. The princess didn't answer, but the way she moved made it clear that she was ready for what came next. The glow from the Nexus chamber began to flicker, its pulsating rhythm becoming erratic, like a heart on the verge of collapse. Something was wrong, something was about to break. Suddenly, the doors to the chamber slammed shut, sealing them inside. Jack's pulse quickened. A soft, unsettling sound vibrated through the walls, whispers, faint but growing louder, as if the very structure of the Nexus was alive and reacting to their presence. A cold, metallic voice echoed through the room, distorted and alien. "The time is upon you." The princess's face twisted in horror, and for the first time, Jack saw true fear in her eyes. The calm, collected persona she had projected faltered. She wasn't prepared for this. "They found us," she whispered, almost to herself, her voice tinged with panic. "I didn't think they would come so soon." "Who?" Jack demanded, his voice tight with urgency. "Who's coming?" "The unseen," she said, her voice low, as if the very name would summon them. "The ancient forces I spoke of. They're here to take me, and you. But it's not just us anymore, Jack. They've already begun to invade this reality." Jack's heart sank. "You said they could manipulate reality, bend time and space. How are we supposed to stop them?" The princess looked at him with an intensity he had never seen before. "We don't stop them. We escape." Her voice was firm, final. "We need to get to the core, the heart of the Nexus. If we don't reach it, the unseen will collapse everything. All of it." The words hit Jack like a wave crashing against the shore. Escape. He had thought that this was about a final confrontation, a battle to save two worlds, to stop the darkness. But now the princess was talking about running, about fleeing from the very thing that had brought him here. "You want us to run?" Jack said, his voice rising in disbelief. "You're the one who told me we have to fight. That I was supposed to stop this." Her eyes softened, a hint of sadness flickering there. "I lied," she said quietly, "and now I'm giving you the truth. The battle is already lost. What we need now is to survive, Jack. The Nexus can protect us for a time, but if we don't escape, they will break it open. All of it will fall apart, and we'll be their slaves. All our people, and Earth too." Jack clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had come here to be the hero, to fight, to win. He had thought he was going to make a difference. Now, he was being told to run. To give up. He didn't know if he could do that. "I'm not leaving," Jack said, determination flooding his voice. "We fight. I'll find a way to stop them." The princess's expression hardened. "You don't understand, Jack. You can't fight them. You cannot defeat the unseen. They are beyond fighting." She turned to face him fully now, her eyes locked onto his, filled with a strange blend of regret and resolve. "The only way to defeat them, is to leave this place." A strange silence fell between them, thick with the weight of her words. The room began to tremble, the walls flashing with an eerie light. The hum in the air grew louder, more oppressive. Something was happening. The Nexus was beginning to break down, to fall apart. We need to go, now, the princess snapped, reaching for his arm. But Jack yanked it away. No. I won't run. If this place is collapsing, then let's fix it. Let's stop them here, before they destroy everything. Her eyes flashed with anger, but also something else, something deep, hidden under the surface. You still don't understand, she hissed. I have been protecting you, Jack. I've been protecting us. The unseen can't be beaten, but we can contain them. But if you want to die, if you want to sacrifice us all for some misplaced sense of heroism, then go ahead. Fight. But when it's over, there will be nothing left. Not for us, and not for Earth. Jack's mind was spinning, his thoughts clashing. Everything he had believed, everything he had fought for, was crumbling. This wasn't a simple war. This wasn't about a galaxy and a few lost battles. It was about survival. And the princess, the one who had brought him here, had already lost hope. But Jack wouldn't accept it. He couldn't. I'm not giving up, he said, his voice sharp and clear. We're not done yet. The princess studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if weighing his resolve. Finally, she nodded, but there was a deep sadness in her expression. Then follow me. If we're going to fight, we do it together. But understand, Jack, this will be the hardest battle of your life. And there's no turning back once we begin. The walls around them shook again, and the floor beneath them began to crack, fissures spreading like veins of ice. The time for running had passed. There was no more room for doubt. Jack followed the princess as she led him deeper into the nexus, where the true heart of the power lay. Every step they took felt like it brought them closer to the final showdown, to the reckoning that would determine everything. This time, there would be no running. There would only be fighting. And Jack was ready to face whatever came next. The final confrontation. The corridor they moved through was narrow, the walls lined with strange, glowing symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The air grew colder as they advanced, the temperature dropping with each step, the hum of energy around them becoming louder, more chaotic. It was as if the very fabric of the nexus was unraveling with every breath they took. Jack could feel it. The presence of the unseen, their influence, was growing stronger, thicker in the air, like an oppressive shadow looming just out of sight. He had never felt fear like this before, not even in the heat of battle, facing overwhelming odds. This was different. This was a force that transcended anything he had ever encountered, a force that could bend reality itself. The princess led the way, her face set in a mask of determination, though Jack could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Despite everything she had taught him, despite the knowledge she had shared, even she wasn't entirely sure what lay ahead. They reached the heart of the nexus, the core. It was vast, a chamber like no other, surrounded by swirling lights and floating orbs that seemed to defy gravity. In the center stood an immense, black crystal, its surface smooth and reflective, yet something inside it shimmered, something pulsed with an ancient power that sent shivers through Jack's spine. This is it, the princess said, her voice steady but quiet. The source of everything. The nexus holds the power to alter reality, to control the forces of the universe. It can bend time, space, even life itself. Jack took a deep breath. So this is where we stop them? The princess nodded. It is. But I need you to understand something, Jack. The unseen aren't just enemies. They are part of this place. Part of my people's history. They were born from the nexus, created when my ancestors tried to harness its power. They are not invaders. They are a consequence of our actions. And they will never stop until they have control of it all. Jack felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. The unseen were not just external enemies, they were a creation of the nexus itself, a product of the very power Jack was now trying to manipulate. It was almost as if they had been born from the desire to control something greater than themselves, and now, that power was the very thing they needed to stop. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and otherworldly, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You think you can stop us, little human?" The air shimmered as a dark figure materialized before them, a shape shifting and flickering like smoke, but with an undeniable presence. It was an entity, no longer bound by physical form. Its features were indistinct, shifting in and out of perception, but its eyes glowed with an eerie, all-knowing light. Jack's heart skipped a beat. It was one of them. One of the unseen. The princess stepped forward, her posture defiant, though Jack could see her hands trembling. "I've been expecting you," she said, her voice calm but full of hidden power. The unseen being laughed, a sound that vibrated through the very core of the nexus, sending a ripple of fear through Jack. "Expecting us? You cannot control what you do not understand, princess. This nexus is our birthright. You were foolish to think you could escape your creation." The princess's expression hardened, and Jack felt the tension in the room snap to a breaking point. "You've been a part of my people's history for too long," she said, her voice growing in strength. "But this ends now. It ends when we say it ends," the unseen being hissed, its voice now a guttural growl. "You cannot stop what was always meant to be. The nexus will bend to us, as it always has." Jack took a step forward, feeling the surge of energy in the air around him. He had no idea what to do, but there was one thing he could feel deep within him: the nexus was alive, and he could sense its power, its potential to alter the very fabric of reality. He had learned how to manipulate it, how to control it. Maybe, just maybe, he could use it against them. As the unseen being advanced, the princess raised her hand, her fingers crackling with energy. "This power is mine to control now," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had come to terms with her role in the universe. "We do not bend to you." But the unseen being was already shifting, its form rippling and morphing as it approached. "You misunderstand, princess," it said, its voice now full of mockery. "You were never meant to control this power. You were meant to serve it. And now, your time is over." Jack's heart raced as the being reached out toward the crystal in the center of the room. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. He could feel the pull of the nexus, the energy within it trying to break free, to tear apart everything around them. In that instant, Jack made a decision. He rushed forward, ignoring the voice of reason that told him to wait, to follow the princess's lead. Instead, he reached out toward the crystal, letting the energy of the nexus course through his veins. He didn't know what he was doing, didn't know if it would work, but he had no choice. The moment his hand touched the crystal, the world around him exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The energy surged through him, a rush so intense that it nearly knocked him off his feet. He could feel the fabric of reality twisting, warping, the nexus and the unseen both pushing and pulling, trying to claim control. And then, in that moment of chaos, Jack understood. The nexus wasn't just a source of power, it was a gateway. A doorway to everything, to the past, present, and future. And it was in his hands. With the last of his strength, he pushed the energy outward, forcing the crystal to release its grip on the unseen, severing their connection to the nexus. The room exploded with sound, a violent clash of energy as the unseen screamed in rage. The princess stood beside Jack, her face determined, but the weight of their actions settling in. The battle was far from over, but the nexus had shifted. They had taken the first step.